gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Carson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise today to draw attention once again to an issue that some in this Congress seem to have forgotten. The millions of Americans who are unemployed or who are working for wages that cannot support their families. Imagine being told that you have to support your family for the rest of your life with just a month's paycheck. If it sounds impossible to manage, it's because far too often it is. Low-income families have to make impossible choices between food and medicine. They often live in unsafe neighborhoods and send their kids to subpar schools because they have no other option. Getting paid the minimum wage has always been difficult, but it's getting harder year after year. If the minimum wage had been tied to inflation in 1960, it would be $10.10 today, or just over $20,000 per year. Now, someone making this today wouldn't be wealthy, but working full-time might at least allow them to make ends meet. For me, this is what our country is really all about. If you work hard, you can build a life for yourself and your family. Madam Speaker, this is why I am a very proud co-sponsor of the Fair Minimum Wage Act, which finally raises the minimum wage for millions of Americans. Now, unfortunately, some of my colleagues oppose this very bill, claiming that raising the minimum wage should be a state-by-state decision. Now, that's fine if your state chooses to raise its minimum wage, but if not, your constituents are no better off. They're still making $7.25 an hour. So I have just one question. If you're a well-intentioned, patriotic Republican who wants to leave the decision up to the states, are you prepared to explain to your constituents why they are worth less to you than the people across state lines? Now, for my part, I do not want low-wage Hoosiers to make less than those in other states just because our General Assembly decides not to act. Of course, I understand the argument that some people may work fewer hours and some may even lose their jobs. This may be true, but it's important to remember that we have raised our minimum wage in the past. And in the past, the very same argument has proven itself to be untrue. So I'm very optimistic that American employers, and particularly Hoosier employers in my congressional district, will do what they can to weather a minimum wage increase without letting folks go. Now, unfortunately, this is not the only unnecessary struggle Congress has laid on America's low-income families this year. Today, our well-intentioned, patriotic Republican leaders continue to block an extension of emergency unemployment insurance. Now, because of congressional inaction, nearly 2 million Americans, Madam Speaker, were instantly cut off from their benefits in December, with 72,000 more being cut off each week. Many of my Republican friends have painted unemployment benefits as a slush fund for certain lazy Americans. Now, this is not only incredibly offensive, it's untrue. Americans want to work, but in many communities, there are simply no jobs available. In our economic downturn, Madam Speaker, everything from restaurants to machine shops to retail stores closed their doors and are only now starting to come back. In Indianapolis, many Hoosiers are finding they no longer have the skills necessary for the modern workforce. Educated men and women with years of experience have to retrain before they even get rehired. Others have seen their industry simply disappear, and have to prepare themselves for an entirely new career. This is far from laziness. Retraining and looking for a job is hard work with no pay. These Americans deserve our help covering expenses while they get back on their feet. Madam Speaker, my good House Republican friends have yet to bring a real jobs bill to the floor in the 113th Congress, instead focusing continually on deregulation and repealing the Affordable Care Act. Meanwhile, they overlooked that raising the minimum wage is the right thing to do, putting our country back on track. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess until noon today.